Hi again, everyone. Welcome back to day 2 of New Jersey's first ever Trails and Greenways Summit. My name is Elise Bremer-Nei, and I am the Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator at the New Jersey Department of Transportation. Once again, I would like to thank NJDOT and the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection for funding, partnering, and working with all the different advocates and stakeholders to bring this summit to you. This session is being recorded. After the summit, videos of this and all the other presentations will be made available online. This is the second panel of the day titled Trails, Transit, and Complete Streets. In this session, you will learn how trails form an important part of New Jersey's active transportation network. You will also hear how to get to and from trails, how to connect trails with the complete and green streets policy, and how New Jersey Transit has integrated trails into its network. I hope you're getting a lot of useful information from all of the great speakers and are feeling as inspired as I am. I also hope you can join us for the rest of our sessions today, and maybe even some of the trail hikes and rides sponsored by a number of our summit partners in this. Information on those post-conference activities can be found at njtrailsaction.org. Just click on upcoming events. With that, I will now turn it over to our moderator, a woman who has probably run every trail in the tri-state area, Janna Chernetz.
Thanks, Elise. I'm getting close, but I don't think I've hit all of them. And as we continue to grow, I hope I never have a chance to get them all because we're continuing to expand the network. Hello, everyone. I am Janna Chernetz. I am the Deputy Director of Tri-State Transportation Campaign. And to expand upon what Elise has laid out, this panel brings together the different stakeholders that play a significant role in trail development and usage in New Jersey. And by the end of this panel, you will have the answers to the following questions. Who are the players involved in the expansion, development, and access of trails in New Jersey? What are the policies and programs that provide the foundation for successful trail development and safe usage in our state? And how do all these puzzle pieces fit together to build the trail network in New Jersey? And then finally, what is the future potential of trails in New Jersey? Before I introduce our 4 speakers, just to make sure that everybody knows what complete and green streets is, I'm just going to give a brief explanation. I'm sure you have all heard of complete streets, but probably not complete and green streets together. What this is a model policy that was developed a few years ago, led by Tri-State Transportation Campaign and a number of partners on the state, MPO, TMAs, nonprofit organizations that got together and created a comprehensive, complete, and green streets policy that captures all of the benefits of smart road design as it improves our equity opportunities, economic vitality, safety, the environment, and I missed one more. Can't believe I did that. And health, I'm sorry, and health. So we'll be hearing a little bit more about that. Right now, there are 8 counties that have passed policies and 169 municipalities. So you'll be hearing from John Boyle, the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia, Michael Viscardi from New Jersey Transit, Paul Gleitz from Monmouth County Parks, and Sonia Szczesna from Tri-State Transportation Campaign. We will have a short Q&A after the panelist presentations with questions submitted by attendees during the registration and during the session through the Q&A function. Hope you enjoy the panel and join us for other sessions today and tomorrow. I will now turn it over to John to kick us off.
Oh, hi there, everybody. Thank you, Janna. Hello, everyone. My name is John Boyle. I am the Research Director for the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia. I am also a New Jersey resident. I live in Edgewater Park, Burlington County. And today I am going to run through how we can use complete streets, complete and green streets treatments to connect standalone trails into a regional network. Here is a map of the existing circuit trails network. You are looking at, this is in the Greater Philadelphia region, and you are looking at about 360 miles of completed shared use paths. And here is our vision of the 800-mile completed network. Some of these trail alignments are actually being planned or constructed, but the majority of these routes are not yet defined. To ensure equity, we need to create a trail network that provides access to all. The Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission our local metropolitan planning organization, identifies communities in the greater Philadelphia region with more vulnerable populations using a tool called indicators of potential disadvantage. The areas in pink were found to have a higher percentage of vulnerable populations, such as single head of household, non-white population, persons with disabilities, elderly, access to a motor vehicle, English proficiency, and poverty. As you can see, the existing trails network has significant gaps in these areas. The picture looks better, but not perfect when we lay it with our built-out network. There are still gaps, though, without planned trails in these areas that are in red. Further planning is needed to ensure that identified areas that are still not within reasonable bike, walk, or even transit distance to a trail are included. When we begin to map out a statewide network, we will need to identify what exists and where there are opportunities to connect with other nearby existing trails. And you can see here, this is, let me go back a slide. Sorry. Looking just north of the Circuit Trails region, Hunterdon and Morris County, this shows that there is an opportunity between the Morristown, Hanover area and the DNR Canal near Frenchtown. And when you look at the existing roadway network to bridge the gaps, they often look like this. Here is Route 31 in Clinton between the Columbia Trail and the Lansdowne Trail. Can we retrofit our existing roads to safely accommodate trail users of all ages and abilities? The answer, of course, is yes. For trail users to continue their journey, they will need good navigational signage and low-stress biking and walking routes. Often when a path crosses a major road or is routed on a busy street, the majority of trail users just simply turn around. Level of traffic stress, or as we call it, LTS, measures the stress level that a bicyclist will feel on a given street. This type of measurement was developed based on surveys, and generally people can identify with one of the 4 categories. As you can see, more than half of the population, interested but concerned, would like to travel by bicycle if they felt safe enough on the road. And so how do we do this? Well, the easiest thing to do is pop-ups. Proposing changes to the street can be alarming for local residents. Temporary pop-ups or pilot projects can give people a sense of how changes will affect their street. This pop-up in Keyport that was completed in May temporarily closed the gap in the Henry Hudson Trail. The results were overwhelmingly positive. You can learn more about the Keyport Complete Streets Policy and Implementation Plan by going to njtpa.org/Keyport. Paul will present on the Henry Hudson Trail a little bit later and give you a deeper dive into the future of the trail. And then, by the way, it's very exciting. So I am looking forward to that. So resurfacing roads, very simple. Restriping streets is a tried and true technique to put in better bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure fast. This is in Philadelphia, which has more than 200 miles of bike lanes, and nearly all of them were added after the roads was repaved. Right, so that's actually, so let me go back a slide here. Can we do that? All right, so here's before. The bike lane was on the right, which is on looking south, so it's on our left. And after resurfacing, they put in, it's hard to see here, but there's flex posts and we got green paint going through on the left side. New protected bike lane. So Route 287 in Morris County, there are separated 2 paved path sections, 2 sections of the Patriots Path in Cedar Knolls. There was a gap. So actually, if you look in this side by the traffic light, there was 1 trail that just ended, and on the other side, same thing. And what the county did was created a 2-way protected bikeway, and that shows that trail connections can be the low-hanging fruit for high-quality bicycle infrastructure. It's also probably helped pull some cyclists off that narrow sidewalk, and it created a safer way to connect these 2 sections of the trail. While pop-ups and adding flexible posts to streets are easy and inexpensive quick build solutions, the next level of investment is building hardened, more permanent solutions. Here is the Route 29 in Phoenixville, PA. This is the before shot. I don't know why I keep going to the after shot. So, kills the surprise. This is what it looks like before. And there was a $2 million project to add a barricade, widen the sidewalk, narrow the roadway a bit, and lo and behold, you got a direct connection to the Schuylkill River Trail. New Jersey's highways like Route 130, Route 22, and Route 322 are some of the most dangerous roads for pedestrians in the state. As part of the Delaware River Heritage Trail East Coast Greenway in Burlington County, the county and New Jersey DOT reconfigured the highway and the Crystal Lake Dam, which is on the right, to create a model side path which could be replicated on other state highways. Railroad bridges are among the most common physical pinch points for pedestrians in New Jersey. Trail access on this section of the East Coast Greenway in Philadelphia, our slides on the bottom, was created by adding a concrete barrier and using every inch of available space underneath the bridge. There is a similar situation on River Road in Pennsauken, which has been identified as a possible route for the Delaware River Heritage Trail. And the Atlantic City line is the rail line overhead. And if you look in the upper left-hand corner, there is enough room to actually create a safe path in the underpass and still providing 11-foot travel lanes for truck traffic. As I said earlier, a busy crossing can effectively cut off two segments of a trail. This pedestrian refuge island was built in 2020 to extend the Pennypack Trail outside of Philadelphia. So Byberry Road has a 40-mile-per-hour speed limit and nearly 20,000 vehicles per day. This is before, this is after. For non-urban highways, rights-of-way, for non-urban areas, highway rights-of-way may be the next frontier for long-distance trails. The upper right photo shows the Schuylkill River Trail along the 422 Expressway near Valley Forge National Park. Gloucester County will be using available NJDOT right-of-way along Route 55 in Elk Township, which is the two pictures below. And you can see in the lower left that there is enough right-of-way that extends more than 150 feet from the highway. In some suburban and rural, even in some suburban and rural county roads, there often has adjacent right-of-way that can accommodate trail development. Earlier this year, New Jersey Transit and Burlington County agreed to the first regional trail commuter rail crossing in the state. Picture on the right shows SEPTA Regional Rail for the Pennypack Trail. And this was completed in 2014. And I would like to, going back to the Delaware River Heritage Trail connection, I was wondering if Mike Viscardi had anything to add about this riverline crossing.
Yeah, thanks, John. The one thing, my understanding is, as with any crossing of active rail, there's a array of safety concerns and issues, and it's a case by case. I think whenever it is feasible to do a crossing either over or under, which obviously can, depending on grades, could be very cost prohibitive. The other issue would be, maybe where can you get a crossing where there's already a sidewalk or a road going through where you have the gates. In this situation, you didn't have that. So that there was a series of safety issues that they had to process. So whenever laying these things out, you try to do whatever you can to use an existing crossing or try to find a way under or over. Fortunately, in this case, we were able to resolve this and get an at-grade crossing.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, this was the first regional trail in New Jersey that also had a commuter rail crossing. So that's great. Thanks. And in case you're wondering, the picture on the right, yes, there is a West Trenton, New Jersey. And yes, SEPTA's only standalone train station happens to be there. So there is, you can get to that trail from New Jersey pretty easily on the Pennypack Trail. Slide 17, sorry. Bridges and underpasses are big ticket items, but these short connections can fill in the gaps. And whether those bridges are shared with motor vehicles or not, we won't have a statewide trails network without them. So at the Delaware beaches, there is an emerging regional trail network that has direct connections to the Cape May Lewis Ferry. And that area is also known for a 20-mile trails loop between the town of Lewis and the city of Rehoboth Beach. And that network was built entirely by the Delaware Department of Transportation and their Department of Natural Resources. So the equivalent to New Jersey DOT and New Jersey DOP work together to build this network. And this trail continues to expand. Up until recently, the biggest gap in this loop was a section of Rehoboth Beach, which required bicyclists to use a busy road, and pedestrians were required to use a narrow sidewalk or walk on the grassy shoulder. Earlier this year, that gap was eliminated with some short trail improvements, a protected two-way bike lane, new sidewalks, and enhanced signage on low-stress streets. And if you look on the left, it kind of shows that it has shortcutted a longer trip. And here's the before shot. This was taken in 2018, Google Street View, and voila, you have new sidewalks, you have a new section of completed trail, and that's you have this interesting interchange between the standard bike lane that continues and the trail / protected bike lane. So this final set of slides will just take you along the multitude of improvements along this corridor that made the route much more comfortable and safer for trail users, vacationers, and residents alike. Hopefully this will work, but here we go. Here's a new extension of the trail, the two-way protected bike lane along 1A. And then we'll turn left into Grove Park. This is a new trail also, making a connection. And then it comes out to the street network with signage pointing to a low-stress streets connection to the beach and Cape Henlopen State Park. If you're ever in that area, or even if you're in the Cape May area, I highly recommend you doing this loop. And thank you very much. And I will now hand it over to Mike Viscardi for his presentation.
Thank you, John. Sorry, a little technical difficulty in this on my end. Okay, so basically there's a few things we're going to talk about recent New Jersey transit policy, our new Transit to Trails program. Then I'm going to get a little more into what we're doing in the planning department about safe routes to transit, bicycle facilities, amenities, and a few other things. And then when Paul goes to speak about the Henry Hudson Trail, I'll be back to talk a little bit about that. Next slide, please. So in June, we adopted a Let New Jersey Transit Take You to the Great Outdoors program. It's a promotion to point out parks and trails throughout the state and which ones you can get access to by bus, by train, by light rail, or transfers in some cases. Next slide, please. So if you go to newjerseytransit.com/trails, basically phase 1 is a new interactive user-friendly online map that identifies New Jersey great parks and green spaces accessible by public transportation. The map has links to New Jersey service details and park information for over 60 national, state, and county parks throughout all 21 New Jersey counties. Results feature bus, rail, and light rail options with easy walking distance to these parks. For a later phase, New Jersey Marketing is seeking corporate partners to sponsor rides to green spaces for underserved communities. Next slide, please. So if you go on the New Jersey Transit Trails page, to the right, you'll see the click on for the welcome to the New Jersey Trails Transit to Trails application. And when you click on that, the map pops up. You see on the left here, this is just a slide. This is not interactive. This was specifically picking out Liberty State Park, Morris Canal Peninsula Park. And when you click on it, it gives you the bus options, the rail options, and there's even a light rail option to get that particular park. Some of the parks on the system will not be next to a trainer, may not be next to a train line, but in a lot of cases, there's access by bus. Next slide, please. A few months back, I had gotten a series of phone calls from a lot of people that were saying e-bikes and e-scooters are banned on New Jersey Transit vehicles. And then shortly thereafter, I learned that the policy was reversed. And I did a little bit of research and what took place. And basically, I think the agency recognizes, and I'll talk about this a few times, the first and last mile and how critical it is. The policy was revised, and there are some exceptions, and we'll try to clarify them the best I can. New Jersey Transit supports and encourages the use of personal vehicles such as bicycles, e-bikes, e-scooters, segways, and hoverboards. There is no extra charge for bringing personal vehicles aboard New Jersey Transit vehicles. Access allowed from all station platforms, and permits are not required. Next slide, please. Now, of course, with rush hour trains and issues like that, there are some exceptions, and I'll go through them. Collapsible personal vehicles are permitted on all transit trains at all times. Non-collapsible personal vehicles have some restrictions. Weekday trains on all lines from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. As you can see, that avoids the rush hour. Are not permitted, non-collapsible personal vehicles. Basically, weekend policy is more flexible. Non-collapsible personal vehicles are permitted on all lines, with the exception of Northeast Corridor, where between 9 a.m. and 12 p.m., arriving in New York and departing to New York. I just can't see my own slide. Departing New York between 5 and 8 p.m. on the weekends, you have to try to avoid those hours if you have a non-collapsible bike. One other thing with the regular bike policy, the Atlantic City line does permit non-collapsible bikes at all times. Next slide. For buses, collapsible personal vehicles are always permitted on New Jersey Transit buses using bike racks on the front of the bus or underfloor luggage compartments. Currently, half of the New Jersey bus fleet is bike friendly. Bike racks are available on all buses in the New Jersey Southern Division. Light rail policy is collapsible personal vehicles are always permitted on all light rail lines. Non-collapsible personal vehicles can be carried on the Hudson Bergen Light Rail and Newark Light Rail vehicles from 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. and from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. on all days. There are no restrictions on non-collapsible personal vehicles aboard Riverline vehicles. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to get into a little bit more of what we are doing in the planning department. New Jersey Transit planning efforts include working with municipalities and counties to conceptually design safe bicycle and pedestrian paths from trails to transit facilities. Improve connections, promote active transportation as a form of commuting to public transit. Improved access enhances greenways and promotes economic prosperity for local businesses. New Jersey Transit efforts also include improving and expanding current bicycle facilities at transit stations by installing additional bike racks and exploring enhanced security personal vehicle parking. Next slide, please. After 9/11, we were pretty much told by police that the bike lockers that we have had, the pods, were becoming a security issue. And what ended up happening is the ones that were already in place were pretty much grandfathered and allowed to continue. New ones have been very difficult. There's a few exceptions that we had where we were able to transfer bike lockers from one place to another. What we've been trying to do is come up with a variety of different ways to come up with more secure bicycle parking. We're working on a grant in South Jersey. We did this in-house to look at doing some covered bike racks. That's one thing where at least you have some cover over the racks. We're also looking in South Jersey to pilot a new locker program, which is basically where the police can see into the locker. This is something we're actively working on. We have not put it in place yet. We hope to have the pilot in Atlantic City done very shortly, and then hopefully we can use that as a model in other places. We are also working with the group that does the bike shelters in New Jersey Transit, they're working on another pilot to work with an RFP to do a bike station type of facility. And right now, we're looking to use CMAQ repurposed money to do a pilot program in North Jersey. We're still looking at locations, but we're eyeballing places like Red Bank, Hoboken, Newark for starters. And then hopefully, if that's successful, we can have vendors do bike stations elsewhere on the system, because we do see the need for it. And between all these different amenities, that gives people a variety of places to have security for bikes, and in some cases scooters as well. So the RFP does ask for the ability to be self-sustaining. So it's most cases, if you can get exposure to sunlight, you can do solar power to activate them. There's other things where, allow e-bikes and e-scooters in those lockers, in those stations. So we are trying to get more facilities back in place where we had a lull where we were not able to put in new lockers. We do recognize there's a high demand for secure bicycle parking and vehicle parking. So we are hoping to, in the next couple of years, start to get these things to pop up. Next slide. So that's all I've got for now. I'm going to turn it over to Paul Gleitz from Monmouth County. We are working with the county, and Paul's going to go over his project and projects. And in the process, we will get into the Henry Hudson Trail, and I'll be back to talk with Paul. So thank you, and I'm turning it over to Paul.
Thanks, Mike. Hello, I'm Paul Gleitz, the Principal Park Planner for the Monmouth County Park System. I work with my colleagues in our Acquisition and Design Department to plan and implement our in-park trails and our regional trails network throughout the county. I'm thrilled to be with you all today. This summit has been something I've been thinking about for a long time. I'm so pleased to see many of you trail advocates in attendance. In my role as the park planner, I was the principal author of our new open space plan for the county that included new and expanded action items in terms of connectivity for the park system. These action items included improving linkages between our parks with multiple use trails, continued development of our regional trail system, integrating our trails into surrounding neighborhoods, and creating links to state or adjacent county parks. Next slide. The connectivity action items that have the most impact on the subject of our discussion today are improving non-vehicular access to our parks, expanding sidewalks and trails to our parks, and determining best routes and eliminating barriers to fixed transit to our county parks. The Monmouth County Park System owns and manages two very popular regional trails, the Union Transportation Trail in western Monmouth County and the Henry Hudson Trail along the Raritan Bay Shore and through the center of the county. Our most popular multiple-use trail is the 5-mile loop trail around the Manasquan Reservoir. The Henry Hudson Trail is 24 miles long and is in two main sections that runs along the Raritan Bay over saltwater marshes, through neighborhoods, and includes sections of open fields and forest. The north section runs from Popamora Point in the Highlands and ends in Keyport and is owned in fee simple by Monmouth County. It was originally purchased as a possible light rail line. The management of the right-of-way was given to the park system over 20 years ago for development of the Henry Hudson Trail. The southern section runs from Aberdeen into Freehold Borough with two main gaps, one at the northern end and one in a section of Marlborough. The southern section of the trail is leased by the county from New Jersey Transit for a regional trail, and we have completed our first 20-year lease term, and we are in our 5-year extension period. We're currently working on another lease with New Jersey Transit for a longer period, but this lease arrangement has created a good working relationship with New Jersey Transit. As many of you heard yesterday, one of the overarching messages from many of those sessions is that trails development is a long game. It takes years to study, plan, design, and implement a trails program, and there are often gaps that must be addressed in later phases of development. In 2019, the park system was awarded $1.2 million Transportation Alternatives Program funding from the federal government for construction, and another $415,000 grant for engineering design for 3 projects on the Henry Hudson Trail. 2 of those projects are to close gaps or extend the trail, and 1 is for a complete streets intersection improvement program. Project number 1 is to extend the southern terminus of the Henry Hudson Trail from its current terminus into downtown Freehold into a new 18-acre parcel acquired by the park system. The engineering study will include designs for a pedestrian bridge or an at-grade crossing. Project 2 under the grant is to fill in the 1.6 mile gap in Marlboro by constructing a link from Highway 79 at Windcrest Road through an acquisition parcel we acquired many years ago to the old right-of-way down through County Route 520. Again, our engineering study is going to include both designs for a pedestrian bridge or an at-grade crossing. Project number 3 in the grant is more of a public safety complete streets implementation project with the improvement of 25 trail crossings in the Bayshore section of the Henry Hudson Trail. As John pointed out earlier, Keyport completed a complete streets pilot project, which including trail crossings of the Henry Hudson Trail. You know, one thing you should note is that one project is to fill a gap, one is to extend the trail, and one is for safer complete streets. This project is really 3 projects bundled together. We've learned that when going after federal funding, bigger is better. The NJTPA wanted to see more ambitious projects, and the amount of work tied to managing a federal grant is only worth it for these larger projects. The most exciting project on the horizon for connecting the gaps on the Henry Hudson Trail comes to us from New Jersey Transit. I'll be presenting the slides on the project, but I'll be asking Mike Viscardi to jump in along the way, as it was his office that has initiated the project and has done the lion's share of the work. The park system is an enthusiastic partner and has the trails development experience and to some extent the ability to contribute meaningful capital resources to a project such as this to make us a meaningful partner on the project. The Transitway concept is to take an existing regional trail in proximity to a rail station and provide an alternative to the current automobile reliant last mile commuting pattern by providing a convenient walking or biking alternative. Please note the existing trail condition on the left and the concept of a possible transitway on the right that includes painted travel lanes, wayfinding, solar lighting for winter commuting. Mike, how did this project first get on your radar?
Am I on video? Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Okay. So basically, I do live in Monmouth County because I had technical difficulties at the beginning on my end. I didn't fully introduce myself, but I am, a director of planning in New Jersey Transit, and I live in Monmouth County, so I'm a big fan of the trail. I use it, but it was several years ago. I had, I ride on the coastline, so I see the right of way that the train crosses, and obviously, as one of my first thoughts was, geez, it doesn't go all the way through. Why is that so? A lot of the answer is because it's on our end. There's one side is an active spur. We'll talk about it a little bit, but there looked like there was some activity on the south side, which is the spur that goes towards Freehold. And I thought maybe they were expanding the trail. So at the time, this was several years ago, I contacted Monmouth County Parks, and it was before Paul, I think it was your predecessor. And basically they said they were just doing some storm drainage work near the tracks. So it was not an expansion of the trail, but it got me thinking about, geez, this really should connect to the train station. So the next thing, fast forward a few years, we basically started to look at, what exists in the gap between the tracks and the station. And around the same time, we initiated a Safe Routes of Transit pilot, which we hired NV5 to look at 3 communities in Monmouth County. I'll just throw in there that Monmouth County was selected because they were the first county to actually adopt complete streets policy. And this is a few years back. So they were really one of the first in the process. So we looked at Middletown, Aberdeen, Matawan stations, and Hazlet stations. They kind of represent 3 types of communities. Hazlet's like suburban. Middletown was more of a, I wouldn't say it's rural, but where the station is located is not in a dense area. And then Aberdeen, Matawan is pretty close to town center, downtown. So it really was a nice example of 3 communities. And we looked at 2 miles for bicycles and 3/4 mile for pedestrians. And NV5 did point out some strong connections from the trail, from the existing trail to the station. So we tried to get some funding, just some of our TTF state funding, to investigate it further. And what we did learn was the 400-foot trestle bridge had some issues, and we'll get into that a little further as we go through the slides. So that's really what kind of alerted me to this, connecting this. And as we go through the discussion, we'll talk more about the project.
Gotcha. Thanks. Next slide. So a project such as this often needs to be broken down into multiple phases to be achievable from a funding and from a construction project standpoint. Phase one of the project would be to see the construction of the link from the train station on New Jersey Transit property to the trail right away and create a link to the local high school, the surrounding neighborhoods. That's that section in red. Phase two includes the replacement of the Lake Matawan train bridge you just mentioned, and then connecting to the southern section of the existing Henry Hudson Trail to provide a much broader access to the neighborhoods of 3 towns along the Henry Hudson Trail to the south. Phase 3 would be the much longer term project of connecting the northern and southern trail sections together by crossing the Garden State Parkway and the North Jersey coastline. Mike, why did you split the project up into these 3 phases?
Paul, it's very, there are 3 separate projects for a number of reasons. One is identifying funding and how to fund each of the projects. It could take a pretty long time to get into a lot of the detail, but the cut to the chase, the bridge is 400-foot trestle. It's historic. We'll talk about that again in the later slides, but the second phase, the red on the graphic here, is actually an old rail line that used to connect to the coastline. Many years ago, that trail was a spur where you see in red, and it connected approximately in the vicinity of Atlantic Avenue, where there's a crossing right now. The idea was if the trail were to continue and you can get over to that crossing, now you're at the train station. We worked with NJTPA, and it's still an active CMAQ repurpose funding opportunity to make that a standalone trail. That red line connects a residential neighborhood in Matawan Regional High School to the train station. We thought that maybe we can use CMAQ money to design and build that spur. So that's why we broke that out as an individual project. The other side of the tracks, there's a couple things going on there. One is, as I mentioned earlier, there's an active spur on the north side, which goes towards Keyport, which is not high-speed rail, but we use it for maintenance and parking some vehicles. It's not used for resilience or storage for trains. It's not quite long enough, but it is used. So one of the hurdles there is either finding another location for that or trying to figure something out where they can coexist. So that's going to be a more difficult project, but we are anxious to look into that. So that is why it's split up into 3. The bridge has some historic application we'll talk about in a little bit. The spur, to me, is the lowest hanging fruit that we can maybe implement the fastest. And then the other side gets into rail issues that I talked about earlier with John, that sometimes it gets more complicated. The other thing they add on that side is there's a ravine right there too. So even if we were able to get, use portion of that right away, we might still have to construct a small bridge to get either get behind the platform at Everett Matawan, or another idea is to go under the tracks at that point. These are things that are going to require some engineering and some research. We did, as part of our study that we're working on currently, we did authorize our consultants to do some survey work. So we got topographic survey of that whole area, so we can really dive in.
Thanks, Mike. I'm going to have to move through a couple of these slides. We're running a little short on time here. So again, cost sharing is going to have to include state funding. We move up to federal funding, and we're going to have to use, and then we're going to have to do some cost sharing between the state and the county to really see this whole project move all the way through. Next slide, please. As you mentioned, we were able to hire HNTB, a nationally recognized rails and trails consulting firm, to work on the project. They partner with others to do both environmental wetlands work and with historical preservation work. So we needed to look at engineering, topographic study, like you just mentioned, historic preservation, and we had to look at permitting as well. Next slide, please. As you mentioned, one of the key components of the study was the bridge assessment, alternative analysis. We need to know if we could rehabilitate and reuse the existing historic train bridge, or was the structure too far gone? And if it was too far gone, would we keep it and do a parallel bridge, or would we build a new one in the existing footprint? Next, please. Two different structural assessments found the bridge to be severely deteriorated and with major components needing to be replaced, even for pedestrian use. And then from the permitting standpoint, parallel bridges would have required individual permits versus permit by rule for construction in the previously disturbed areas. So our current recommendation right now is that we're going to construct a new bridge in the same architectural style. As you mentioned, we've completed the topo surveys, and next we're going to be going on to preliminary and engineering designs for that replacement bridge. Next slide. As you said, phase 3, you noted some of the difficulties in phase 3. That'll be probably the most difficult part of the entire project, is connecting the north and the south sections together, but we're going to keep moving forward on that. Luckily, the county does own the Garden State Parkway Bridge, so we're going to be working with the Turnpike Authority on how to best rehab that. And then we're going to work cooperatively with transit to determine whether we're going to go under, over, or around that North Jersey coastline to connect up to the rest of the trails and the two sections, bringing them together. Next, please. Real quickly, as I mentioned earlier, we purchased 18 acres in the middle of Freehold Borough. This is going to allow us to extend the Henry Hudson Trail into the center of town, and that's going to give us access to the old Freehold Jamesburg agricultural right-of-way. And our hope is then to extend, work with transit and Conrail to go along that right-of-way all the way down into Allaire State Park through Freehold, Howell, and Farmingdale. And that would then connect us to the Edgar Felix Bike Path so that we can go from Manasquan to Sandy Hook through in a large loop through the center of the county and not up along the coastline. So that is our long-term vision for the Henry Hudson Trail. Next. And real quickly, I was asked to give some of the perspective in terms of complete streets from the role of the local government. 93% of the road mileage in New Jersey is under county or local jurisdiction, but only 38% of the counties and 30% of the towns have adopted complete street resolutions. So basically, if we want to have a meaningful statewide look at complete streets, it's going to be up to all of us to work with our local decision makers to understand that it's not just the state and federal policies, but it's the local and county policies have to be updated to make sure that we have implementation of complete streets throughout the state. So again, I want to say thanks everyone. Next slide is just my contact information, and I'm going to hand it off to Sonia, where she's going to continue our discussion as she talks about wayfinding.
Thanks, Paul. Hey everyone, my name is Sonia Szczesna. I'm the Director of Active Transportation for the Tri-State Transportation Campaign, and I'm also the New Jersey Vice Chair of the Circuit Trails Coalition. So continuing on our theme here, I'm going to talk about a pilot project happening in South Jersey that seeks to connect transit to trails through wayfinding. And while this will be a pretty specific context, I hope you can use this information to think creatively about simple solutions to getting more people out on your trails locally through wayfinding and extending an overt welcome. So one of our panel's themes today is partnerships, and this pilot project is a testament to that. Tri-State Transportation Campaign is working on this in partnership with New Jersey Transit, thanks Mike, with the support of the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission's new funding source called the Transportation Options Program, also known as TOP. And this is also repurposed CMAQ money, and the fund seeks creative and practical ideas from nonprofits, government organizations, for-profit organizations, and transit agencies that will reduce the number of single occupancy vehicles, people driving alone to work, school, entertainment venues, or on errand runs on our region's roadways. Our project is looking to eliminate these trips by making it easier and more convenient to walk or bike to the train station. So TOP funds ideas that respond to the goals, outcomes, and strategies established in the Regional Transportation Demand Management Plan, which Sean from DVRPC spoke about earlier in today's summit. The plan identifies 5 goals that address improving air quality, equity, reliability, affordability, and the freedom to choose travel options. So through this project, we really want to improve access and also air quality by encouraging active transportation to connect riverline stations to trails and transportation networks that involve active transportation rather than driving to them. And ensuring that these stations are easy to access by walking and bicycling also ensures that transit can be truly affordable, equitable, and safe for all to get to. We also want to promote the use of the Circuit Trails network for both commuting and recreation, encouraging more users to walk, ride, and roll throughout this network and the region. So I know some of you might be sick of hearing about the Circuit Trails, but it is a really great network. And to just reiterate what John mentioned and what many of you may have heard, the network is an 800+ mile planned trail across 9 counties in the Delaware Valley region, both in New Jersey and in Pennsylvania. So we're at about 350, 360 miles of trail built, and there's a coalition of partners called the Circuit Trails Coalition working on building that out. Their current objective is to reach 500 of those miles by 2025. And on the New Jersey side of the circuit, the network runs through Mercer, Burlington, Camden, and Gloucester counties, which happen to be mostly the same ones that the River Line runs through, with the exception of Gloucester County. So on this map, you'll see a bit more details on parts of the network. In bold green lines, you'll see the existing trails, while the ones in orange are considered in progress. So in progress means they're fully funded, have right-of-way secured, and design is underway or finalized. They are happening. Whereas the trails in the pipeline stage, which is the purple color, means they have had some kind of feasibility study done, but they still have some kind of obstacle that we have to get through. Either design needs to be completed, or there's a lack of public right-of-way. There's something that's being done. And for the blue lines that you see on the map, those are called planned trails, which means they're in certain planning documents, either at the local or the county level, but no feasibility or other phases have begun. The Circuit Trails Coalition, thanks to the work of DVRPC and other various partners, regularly updates the status of these trails to help focus on the major gaps in the network. And you can see the black line here is the River Line light rail route, with all the stations listed out. You can see that the trail network runs parallel and often intersects New Jersey Transit's South Jersey light rail system, which provides unique opportunities to potentially share space and access. So we decided for this pilot, we would look at 5 Riverline stations and examine what it looked like to connect them to trails to create a simple journey from trail to station for a new user, and from the station to the trail as well. Our plan is to use a number of wayfinding signs to help guide a journey and reinforce that by also providing bicycle maintenance tools at the station and adding anything missing like bicycle racks that you might expect at the station. We've seen the bike fix-it stations, repair stations around the circuit as hugely popular. There is one near the Benjamin Franklin Bridge that was installed by the Rails to Trails Conservancy. And there's another one at the Trenton Transit Center that was installed by the Greater Mercer Transportation Management Association. Both of those have been highly popular and even used by nearby community members who just might not have access to these tools at home. So how did we decide on our 5 stations? Thanks to New Jersey Transit, we did have access to data showing bicycle ridership to each station to help inform our decision, as well as ridership overall. But what really drove our decision-making was looking at which stations were near completed trails or ones that are nearing completion, and also had space for this intervention. Since this is a pilot program, our hope is that this project can be expanded based on our findings in this initial phase. And eventually each of the Riverline stations will have some reference to the circuit, and all stations will have bicycle amenities. But for now, we plan to do 5 and see where it takes us. And I'll run you through those really quickly. So the Bordentown station is really close to the DNR Canal towpath. We chose this station not only for its proximity to the trail, but also has a really large parking lot that could potentially double as a trailhead, depending on time of day and if the parking lot is being under or overutilized. The Roebling station was another one we chose. This one was a no-brainer for us because it's really close to the newly opened section of the Delaware River Heritage Trail that I'm sure many of you have heard about during the DOT Commissioner's opening remarks and at various panels. This section of trail is really a gold standard, and the station is really close to both the trail and a tourist attraction that many may want to visit called the Roebling Museum. Delanco and Riverside stations are both near a trail that is funded for construction and expected to be open by the time the signs are installed. And finally, Cooper Street Station is near a number of completed trails, as you can see, but we wanted to ensure there's an obvious connection for commuters that may want to continue to or from Philadelphia via the Ben Franklin Bridge walkway, and also find connections to trails throughout the city. And just one more note, we're going to be adding an amenity and bike racks to the Palmyra station. We are not yet installing wayfinding there. So we're lucky enough that our coalition has already developed unified sign guidance for any trail within the network. Unified sign designs help users know that they're on the right track and help them recognize the system at large. You can think of any great trail network around the country and they have some kind of recognizable symbol or design. That being said, the circuit trails are a network of trails that are created, maintained, owned, and named by a variety of partners. The coalition owns none of these trails, and therefore with these designs, we need an opportunity for co-branding and customization. This allows for us to name the various segments and also show what local partners are involved in those segments. For this project, we will also be working creatively to integrate these signs into existing wayfinding networks so that they can be complementary. We're also looking to customize them with QR codes so that information is accessible in various languages and to users with various abilities. The QR codes will allow us to provide the latest information on developments of certain segments, and in turn help us learn how many people are actually reading and visiting these sites from each station to measure its effectiveness. We also, in this project, we also hope to add a few additional design sign types to the circuit trails vocabulary to identify ways to put signs either on the road or on the trail to make that connection more obvious. Wayfinding and amenities are not only useful tools for our trail users, but they also raise awareness about local trails and connections, helping people reimagine how they use either trails or transit. They also provide what Amy Camp, who's our keynote speaker later today, calls an overt welcome, enticing new visitors to come explore a new place. I'd like to end my presentation with two examples of taking this warm welcome to the next level and share some more creative wayfinding and bicycle amenity projects that have happened in our region. This first one was done by New Jersey Transit's Transitional Art Project and developed by artist Wills Kinsley, and it's at the Trenton Transit Center's Riverline Station. And on the right, you can see a Circuit Trails kiosk station. That's another example of both a creative wayfinding element and extending an overt welcome that'll be near the Battle Monument. Both of these show how the personality of place can shine through in efforts like these. Thank you all. I will pass it back to Janna so we could all have a conversation.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate those detailed presentations and the effort that went into making sure we were able to get as much information out to our viewers today as possible. And just really quickly, I noticed, and I'm sure all of you who are watching this noticed that we all have backgrounds that are trail related, and it is not by chance, although some of us do have these up regularly. Would you all take a minute and just maybe tell everybody what we're looking at in your background? I mean, I can start by saying that this is the Watchung Reservation in Mountainside, New Jersey, and I believe it's the Pink Trail, which would be the History Trail, which links all of the historical parts of the Watchung Reservation into one 6-mile loop. Anyone, Sonia, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so this trail right here is actually an extension of the DNR Canal towpath and also known as the Delaware River Heritage Trail. It goes over Crosswicks Creek and connects Bordentown to the section of the trail that goes from Trenton. And it's also a rail width trail. So you can see the Riverline tracks are right there.
Very cool, Sonia. Paul, what are we watching on your screen there?
Oh, this is the Henry Hudson Trail. So right, as you can imagine, this is as the Papamora Point is over my shoulder. This is a section in Atlantic Highlands, and it's probably one of the most beautiful sections of trail we have because it goes right along the Raritan Bay.
Awesome, I've been on that section. It's beautiful. John, you've got trails in yours too?
Right, this is the Delaware River Heritage Trail, and that is the underpass under Route 130. And I've noticed it's been in several presentations.
And Mike, I don't think you have a trail, but you are sitting in the transit office. Is that right?
No, I'm actually in my basement. I was in the office yesterday. And then I got the lovely wall behind me. Actually, what Paul mentioned, we go there all the time. It's a jewel. That section. I think the secret's out though. Now there's always a lot of people on it now. It's really one thing to mention about Paul's trail is after Sandy, they just did a fabulous job of restoration. It's really it's worth a trip.
Absolutely, you can take transit to get there.
Academy.
Okay, so thank you all. And as we know, work is never done. There's always more things that we can do to make our trail network even better. I'd like to pose this question, this visioning question to each of the panelists, and just really briefly, especially in your distinct roles as working in an agency, working for county government and advocates, how do we continue to grow our network in New Jersey and make it more accessible and inclusive in our state? Paul, I'm going to kick it off to you as a county representative.
Sure. From our perspective, it's really if residents really need to be present at meetings and let people know, let the decision makers know that this is important to them. We do a lot of user surveys, and trails are always the #1 request, both paved trails and unpaved trails from all of our visitors. So whether you're coming, if you wanted to go to one of our Board of Recreation Commission meetings or County Commission meetings, even to your local council meetings, your town and city meetings, and let them know that you support this and that you think it's an important use of tax dollars. And if you are a local who walks the same trail and you have a great idea about where it can connect to next, or where it should go next, reach out to the folks who manage that trail and let them know, hey, have you ever thought of this? And they may have an answer that, yes, we have, and here's the reasons why we don't, or they may have said, no, we never have, and let's take a look at it.
Great. And Paul, how can people find out how to access those kinds of meetings or information on how people, where exactly they should be reaching out to?
Sure. I mean, depending on your own county, I would start at your county office, your county website, go to the planning office, look at the engineering office, and look at a lot of counties will have a transportation committee as a part of their planning board, county planning board. The engineer may have an advisory committee, and also directly contacting your county commissioners. Oftentimes, county commissioners have different departments that they're the official liaisons to. So find out who is the Parks and Rec liaison on your Board of County Commissioners. Find out who your roads and trails or your highway. All these different county commissioners meet with their departments, meet with the executives and the managers of these departments. And so if they're hearing things from the public, the next time they go and talk to them, they're going to ask them those questions and they're going to want a follow-up answer.
Fantastic, Paul. Thank you so much for highlighting the important role that residents can play in the future of trail development. Mike, I want to pose this question to you, and certainly as transit is trying to capture ridership post-COVID, as we have completely changed the way we live and move. What is the future for New Jersey transit and its connections to trails and making them more accessible?
Well, there's a couple different things here. One, just want to mention, I've recently been to, my daughter recently moved to Arlington, Virginia. The trail system there is just amazing, and I'd like to see that. And you know, this is what's so great about this this summit, is that this is the direction we want to all go in, and if they can do it, we can do it. As far as transit goes, it's all about first and last mile. From one perspective, it's the ability to for people to commute. From that perspective, it's having these connections made, not only to get to a station or a bus station, but to get to their place of work. And then in reverse, to be able to take mass transit to enjoy recreation. It's really, those connections need to be promoted, need to be, find the funding, get the design done so that you could get the funding, and just move in the direction of connectivity. The last thing to mention is, you know, we've gone through this whole process of transit-oriented development at transit. So in addition to providing that first and last mile, the reverse of having people have a place take transit and then be able to ride on trails, for transit-oriented development, to have recreation in your backyard is a plus. So you're next to transportation, and now you've got access to the trails. So there's a lot of different things where ridership can be expanded, and where the promotion in both directions works. I think one of the offshoots of this is for bike share down the road, is to produce a bicycle that's not clunky and heavy. Maybe come up with something where if you take a train to Aberdeen, Mattawan, you can get a nice bike and ride on the trails if you don't bring your own bike, and ride all day on the trails. So there's really a lot of interplay between expanding transit and promoting recreation.
Fantastic, Mike. And can you just remind our audience where they can access the app, the Transit to Trail app? Is it both you have to download on your phone, or can you use it straight from the web?
I think you get it straight from, well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if our presentation is going to be available electronically, but the link to the app is right on that.
Fantastic. Maybe we could drop it in the public chat if we have a chance. Great. And then
Put it in there.
Thanks, Sonia. You're always on top of it. And then, of course, the perspective of the advocate, which is obviously near and dear to my heart. Sonia and John, I'm going to pose this question to you. Where do we go here? How do we make it bigger and stronger and better and more accessible?
Well, I mean, I think Mike touched on a really important point, which is we need to be thinking about this holistically. We can't be making trails piecemeal, and we can't be thinking about transit piecemeal. We should be looking at trails as part of our transportation network and be thinking about it from that perspective. So, it's not enough to just say that a trail will be near one transit station. We need to make sure people can get to a bus stop from a bus stop without being afraid for their lives if they don't have a vehicle. So we need a comprehensive view of safety, complete streets, trails, and transit to make an active transportation network for everyone in the state. And I think we could do that through even, as John was saying, maybe he'll expand on this, quick builds. We can make this stuff happen faster and then continue to build on that.
Fantastic. Add?
I concur with Sonia there, and really, so we have been, as the Circuit Trails Coalition, commenting on the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission's long-range plan. And what we saw was that it was a two-part document, and part one was great because it had everything that we wanted to see in it. At 2050 was a vision that land use would be better. We'd be spending 17% of all transportation dollars on bicycle and pedestrian projects. But then we went to part two, and what we saw was the actual breakdown of what were the plans of the region to spend their transportation dollars. And what we saw was more of the usual, some highway widening, basically a reliance on electric vehicles to kind of meet our goals. And the numbers didn't really show up as to the actual, the 17% number, which was stated. It didn't really show up until it was back-ended. So this is a 2050 plan. We're seeing 4% of all I believe in New Jersey, we're actually planning 5% of all transportation dollars we spend on bike ped through like the 2020s and the 2030s. And it really is around 2045 for this 2050 plan. And all of a sudden, all this money comes flowing in the back end. So we asked for changes. The other thing is that we wanted to make sure that the circuit trails remained in the long range plan. And I think all the other MPOs should really think, if we do have a statewide trails network, it needs to be part of all the transportation plans, whether it's New Jersey DOT's capital program or the Metropolitan Planning Organization's long-range plans.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate that answer. And that's really important. You've highlighted about coordination and cooperation and collaboration to making sure that it's one cohesive network as opposed to looking at in separate silos. And that's where we're going to build it, make it stronger, and have that connectivity level. I want to start by going into the questions that came from our viewers. I'm going to try to hit everything. It might not be your exact question, but but I'm hoping that you will have captured at least some of your question or the answers that you were looking for. And if not, I encourage you to reach out to any of the panelists here if you want to discuss anything further. One question that came in was, should we, instead of complete streets, would it be better term complete networks to include both on-road and off-road facilities? You heard Sonia talking about networks. You heard John talking about networks. You heard all of our panelists talking about networks. And I think that absolutely we need to be looking at all of our transportation in the state and how it all comes together and works together. And complete streets, the concept is ever evolving. It is a very dynamic policy. As soon as you finish one draft, it's potential to amend it and to modify it as we are continuing to grow and reprioritize and we change our mindset. Hopefully we get to the point where complete streets becomes the norm. But until then, we will work to continue to grow it and to incorporate it into all aspects of all of our planning and on a local, county, and state level, and in the lexicon of everybody. To be honest with you, if we're going to really see this become truly the way we grow as a state. One of the biggest questions we always have is money. Where do we find the money? Where do we find the money for developing trails, for something that's beyond recreation, for transportation? You heard some of the panelists talk about funding pots, but where are some of the major funding pots that we can look towards? And I'll pose this to all of you.
Well, we're looking to, like I said before, bundle up our projects so they're big enough for federal funding. I think one thing that I'd like all us to think about as we move forward over the next couple of years is, the DVRPC, those folks have that William Penn Foundation money that acts like bridge funding. So a lot of projects in this kind of realm are either we need 20, 30 grand to build a natural trail somewhere, or we can bundle up 6 or 7 projects into a $1 or $2 million project. But where's the money coming from for that $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 project? And you're not going to be able to go, maybe you can get state funding for that. Maybe the county's got to make a big one-time capital commitment to do something like that. But if we can find a way to reach out to other foundations and the for-profit business world and other folks to create that type of funding, that bridge funding, that $100,000 to $500,000 funding for these trails outside of the greater Philadelphia area and in the rest of the state, that's going to go a long way to moving a lot of these projects forward, because it's either a couple grand for a little thing or a couple million for a big thing, and a lot of our trails projects fit right in that sweet spot in the middle. So I'm excited to, over the next couple of years, to work with everyone who's attending this summit to find ways to create that kind of funding.
One of the issues that when we talked to the DVRPC about the long range plan was that for federal projects to build a $1 million trail, which is pretty much the soft cap for transportation alternatives funds in New Jersey, there is just the same amount of effort to do that $1 million trip, or even less than that, than a $40 million highway project, as far as going through the steps in the environmental reviews. So Paul's idea about bundling projects and thinking of these places as corridors or networks and funding them at the same time would bring the economies of scale together to help build a lot of miles fast. Especially when we have competitive programs where trail projects are competing against one another, and we're seeing like every single program we have is greatly oversubscribed. We're just not going to get there that way.
The key on my end is getting things shovel ready, not 100% design necessarily, but enough concept laid out, permits identified, processes identified. So at least when grants become available, you have something ready to go. I find that's very important. Trying to do it after the fact is very difficult. In a lot of cases, you won't get the grant if you don't have something already drawn up. So that's what we're trying to do here. Go ahead.
That's something we can kind of hopefully rely on the counties a little bit. The counties do have some of that staff capability to get us to those 10%, design and come up with, budgets, round number budgets for these type of things. It's hard for a municipal or a nonprofit sometimes to do that kind of work. And it's, but to sometimes, working within the counties or the counties together, it's kind of that's our regional governing, structure. That might be a way for us to kind of think about these and getting them quote unquote shovel ready.
I can't agree enough. And I would just give a shout out also to the local bike ped office, because they have for very early projects, feasibility studies, the local bike ped technical assistance program, which has been a huge asset to many communities in the circuit, trying to figure out where to start.
Yeah, finding the money sources is really, at the crux of a lot of these projects. And it's good to know there are a variety out there, and also creative ways to think about funding these projects, public-private partnerships, foundations. The sky's the limit. We just have to put our heads together to figure out how to fund these projects. And we could probably talk about this for another hour and 15 minutes, but unfortunately we are out of time. I do want to wrap up by asking a really important question. I just want some resources. We talked a lot about community input and having residents talking to their local officials, whether it's about how to get a complete streets policy adopted, how to grow trails, or maybe perhaps some specific things that they like to see in their communities. Can we at least provide in the chat some of the resources that you guys would recommend that people look towards if they want to continue to advocate in their communities? And then we'll wrap up right after that.
Yeah, we can do that. And Jenna, I just wanted to jump in here. Sonia, you mentioned the local planning assistance program for bicycle and pedestrian projects, and that's at New Jersey DOT. Towns and counties can apply for that program just by sending in a request to the department. But keep in mind, we're going to need resolutions of support from the governing bodies that are involved. And we're also going to require that you participate by getting the word out and by providing meeting space and helping us with research. So just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thanks, Elise. So we're dropping some resources into the chat. If you go online to DOT's Complete Streets page and look at the model Complete and Green Streets policy, there are a lot of resources in that document that talk specifically about infrastructure and funding. You can find that in the appendix of the Complete Streets policy. So if you haven't accessed that came out in the summer of 2019, I would encourage you all to do that. It's a wonderful resource written in plain English that also has links. So we're out of time now, and thank you all for your questions, and a big thank you to our excellent panelists today. I know I have learned a lot, and I hope you all did too. As a reminder, all sessions are recorded and will be available post-summit on the NewJerseyTrailsAction.org website. If we did not have time to get to your question, please see the handouts on the session page and on the summit website for information about how to follow up directly with the panelists in this panel or any other panel that you were at. Just a quick reminder that Transforming Towns Through Trails is the next session. It starts at 1:30. Hope to see you on there. And when this session ends, we prompted to take a short feedback survey. We appreciate you taking the time to fill it out and look forward to your responses. And please don't forget to join the New Jersey Trails Action Network. So thank you for spending the rest of your morning with us, and have a great afternoon.